In Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche asks his most frightening question. What if the greatest danger to mankind is not evil, not war, not violence, but rather our morality? What if the greatest danger to our species is not the villain, not the barbarian, but the moral man, the good man? Today, with the civilizational, moral, and even biological crisis which the West is experiencing, this question is more pertinent than ever. It is my assertion that the West is collapsing, not because of a decline in religion, a loosening of morals, decadence, degeneracy, or any of the usual suspects. All these, I believe, are merely symptoms of a deeper problem. The West is declining because we have strayed so far from nature that we never, at any point in our lives or our culture, come into contact with reality. We live in a world which is completely insular and artificially constructed, conceptually, morally, and physically. When one makes a simple observation, such as the fact that people are born with unequal abilities, or that nature favors the beautiful, the average Westerner recoils in horror. How could you say such a thing? They scold. Why do you have such hatred in your heart? Don't you think that people should be treated equally? They jump immediately from observation to assertion, unable to acknowledge that reality is separate from the morals which we would seek to impose upon it. Yet these simple observations about the harsh reality of nature are self-evident, even to the liberal who dares not utter them. Our high moral sentiments are getting in the way of us perceiving reality as it is. Though it has been many years since Darwin and the discovery of the natural sciences, we dare not apply the observations which we make about nature to man. We no longer believe in a divine origin of man, and readily acknowledge that he is an animal like all the rest, yet still we hold him sacred, still we seek to keep him at arm's length from nature, and thus our civilization continues to drift, tossing wildly every which way, perilously unmoored from reality. It is now, in this hour of crisis, that we must ask ourselves, is our morality hurtling us towards destruction? Is our morality killing us? This is a question which the Renaissance thinker Niccolò Machiavelli was concerned with in his time. In Book 2, Chapter 2 of Discourses on Livy, Machiavelli argues that Christianity has made the Europeans of his time weak and stifled their love of liberty. He writes, "In considering, therefore, why all the peoples of ancient times were greater lovers of liberty than those of our own day, I believe this arises from the same cause that today makes men less strong, which I believe lies in the difference between our education and that of antiquity, based upon the difference between our religion and that of antiquity. For while our religion has shown us the truth and the true path, it also makes us place a lower value on worldly honor, whereas the pagans, who greatly valued honor and considered it the highest good, were more ferocious in their actions." End quote. Machiavelli proposes that Christianity, which places a lower value on worldly honor, has made the men of his time unable to undertake ferocious action, which the peoples of antiquity employed to defend their liberty. He continues, "This can be seen in many of their customs, beginning with the magnificence of their sacrifices as compared to the modesty of our own, in which there is some pomp that is more delicate than magnificent, but no bold or ferocious action. In their rites, neither pomp nor magnificence was lacking in the ceremonies, but there was, in addition, the act of sacrifice, full of blood and cruelty, and the slaughter of a great number of animals, a spectacle which inspired awe and rendered the men who witnessed it equally awesome." End quote. Machiavelli characterizes Christian ritual as modest and more delicate than magnificent, in contrast to the pagan animal sacrifices of antiquity, full of blood and cruelty. It is precisely these cruel and bloody sacrificial rituals which Machiavelli praises that Christ, the last sacrifice, refutes. In Christ, it is not the sacrificer who is made awesome, but the sacrificial victim, the slaughtered lamb, and Machiavelli surely was aware of this. Machiavelli continues, "Our religion has more often glorified humble and contemplative men, rather than active ones. Moreover, our religion has defined the supreme good as humility, abjection, and contempt of worldly things. Ancient religion located it in the greatness of mind, strength of body, and in all other things apt to make men the strongest." End quote. Machiavelli asserts that Christianity does not only devalue worldly honor, it finds its highest good in a contempt of worldly things. In contrast, ancient religion found its highest good in greatness of mind and strength of body. Machiavelli was an enthusiastic student of the classics and was surely aware that Plato's dialogue, Gorgias, had already set a precedent for the kind of moral questions which Machiavelli discusses in discourses on Livy as well as in The Prince. In Gorgias, Callicles argues that morality is simply a tool of the weaker used to restrain the stronger, and that might makes right is the true, natural, and just law of nature. Callicles calls into question the value and sincerity of morality, but Machiavelli takes this idea a step further by discussing the effects of morality on history. And it is this line of questioning which Nietzsche, who was aware both of Plato and Machiavelli, would take up in Genealogy of Morals. In Nietzsche's explosive preface to Genealogy of Morals, he writes, "Let us speak out this new demand. We need a critique of moral values. The value of these values is for the first time to be called into question. And for this purpose, a knowledge is necessary of the conditions and circumstances out of which these values grew, and under which they experienced their evolution and their distortion, especially since such a knowledge has neither existed up to the present time, nor is even now generally desired. The value of these values was taken for granted as an indisputable fact, which was beyond all question. No one has, up to the present, exhibited the faintest doubt or hesitation in judging the good man to be of higher value than the evil man, of a higher value with regard specifically to human progress, utility, and prosperity generally, not forgetting the future. What? Suppose the converse were the truth? What? Suppose there lurked in the good man a symptom of retrogression, a danger, a temptation, a poison, a narcotic, by means of which the present sacrificed the future, more comfortable and less risky perhaps than its opposite, but also pettier, meaner, so that morality would really be to blame if the maximum potentiality of the power and splendor of the human species were never to be attained, so that really morality would be the danger of dangers." End quote. Here we must ask ourselves what Nietzsche means by morality. Why is it a danger? What would it mean to abandon it? Would an abandonment even be possible? Are we not moral creatures, creatures of compassion? Is that not what separates us from the other animals? For Nietzsche, man is the creature which values, which creates moral valuations. When Nietzsche critiques morality, he does not mean that we should have no values in a postmodern sense. Rather, he asserts that we can look critically at the value of our values, and at the value of different moral systems. Nietzsche is not advocating for a complete abandonment of honor, love, loyalty, compassion, and embrace of wickedness and villainy, as those who have not read Machiavelli characterize his philosophy. Nietzsche is returning to the view which is suggested in Homer, the same which Machiavelli was getting at, that morality is imposed by man upon nature, that morality stems from man. Thus, we can assess morality through an almost biological perspective. From what instinct or will does a morality arise? What purpose does it serve, psychologically, evolutionarily even, and what effect does it have, individually, societally, and historically? On the historical and biological effects of taming and civilizing moralities, Nietzsche writes, "Assuming as true what, in any event, is taken as the truth nowadays, that it is the purpose of all culture simply to breed a tame and civilized animal, a domestic pet, out of the beast of prey, man, then we would undoubtedly have to consider all those instincts of reaction and resentment, with whose help the noble peoples and all their ideals were finally disgraced and overpowered as the essential instruments of culture. By contrast, the opposite would not only be probable, no, nowadays it is visibly apparent. These instruments of culture are a disgrace to humanity, and more, a reason to be suspicious of, or an argument against, culture in general. We may be right when we hang on to our fear of the blonde beast at the heart of all noble peoples and keep up our guard, but who would not find it 100 times better to fear if he could at the same time be allowed to admire, rather than not fear, but in the process no longer be able to rid himself of the disgusting sight of the failures, the stunted, the emaciated, the poisoned? Is that not our fate? Today, what is it that constitutes our aversion to man? For we suffer from man, there is no doubt of that. It's not a matter of fear, rather it's the fact that we have nothing more to fear from man, that the maggot man is in the foreground swarming around, that the tame man, the hopelessly mediocre and unpleasant man, has already learned to feel that he is the goal, the pinnacle, the meaning of history, the higher man." End quote. Nietzsche, like Machiavelli, states the case that the danger in our morality is that it has weakened and domesticated man, and it has turned him from a beast into something meek, sterile, and timid, something which we can no longer fear, and therefore no longer love. Thus, as he said earlier, our morality does not represent the pinnacle of civilization, but rather decadence, nihilism, a shrinking away from life, and a squandering of man's highest potential. Therefore, we must assess our values with a detached severity and a mind towards our highest aims and goals. We must question our seemingly good-intentioned moral sentiments with suspicion. Could the moral crusades of the self-righteous left be rooted in an avoidance of action, a lack of meaning and fulfillment, or perhaps a deep-rooted feeling of guilt? Could our high morals be a way of justifying the world to ourselves? Of justifying ourselves to ourselves? Why is it that we cannot look honestly on the world? Why can we not look honestly into our own faces? Could it be that we, like Oedipus, would rather strike out our own eyes than see ourselves as we really are? Let's take the example of animal sacrifice, as given to us by Machiavelli. We view this as barbaric. We good Christians, or good liberal Democrats, have no need for such barbarities. Yet factory farming is a cruelty much worse than animal sacrifice. So what is the solution? Do we turn to veganism? Do we condemn life itself as violent and cruel for requiring death, pain, and sacrifice? Do we embrace a total, self-sacrificial nihilism which rejects the world and being itself? Do we engage in wholesale warfare against nature and reality, attempting to transform it to fit our moral sentiments? Here we are caught in a conundrum. If we completely reject the inherently violent and competitive nature of life with a self-sacrificial nihilism, we forfeit our lives, either in the short or long term. If you want to be strong, beautiful, and vital, you will need to eat meat. We cannot get the nutrients which we need without sacrificing thousands of animals for our sustenance. How do we deal with this reality? Perhaps through making this necessary cruelty holy and sacred through religious ritual, like the ancients did? Would it not be better to be well acquainted with the cruelty of slaughtering animals than to keep it hidden, at a distance? If we ignore the realities of nature, then we are destroyed by our own naivety. The best path forward is to acquaint ourselves with the reality of nature, however bloody, however cruel, to dare to look upon the face of our figurative creator, however terrible the visage. Only then can we begin to posit goals, and from there, our morality will follow. For 500 million years, complex life has been evolving on this planet. And during this time, there were 5 mass extinctions which each wiped out 70 to 90% of all life on Earth. The species on this planet today represent less than 1% of all species which have lived on this planet. And uniquely, among all these species, we have the ability to guide the path of our own evolution. This is why our values are so important. Now, more than ever in history, our values shape our environment, and thus determine how we develop epigenetically and how we will develop as a species moving forward. How do we address the problem of evolution, of gene editing, of genetic engineering, of the integration of our biology with technology? How do we deal with our ability to bring back extinct species and to create new ones, to colonize other planets and seed them with life? As a species, we are still in our infancy, just barely becoming conscious of what we are and how we came to be. And it is now, for the first time, that those few among us can begin to ask, what will we become? And what great tasks lie before us?